My private member's bill is C-277. It is a bill to create a palliative care framework for Canada. And essentially, we're trying to make sure that we have consistent access for palliative care for all Canadians. The assisted dying legislation that was brought in was studying the Carter decision. And the special committee that was put together to look at that concluded that if you didn't have good palliative care, you really didn't have a true choice. And so based on that and an all-parliamentary committee that existed the previous session that studied palliative care and came out with recommendations, my bill then is the culmination of that. It sets out defining what service will be covered, the training levels that will be needed for the different levels of health care, getting a plan to implement consistent access across Canada, which will be difficult because there are places that have nothing and there are places that are very remote, so there's some challenges to address there. And then trying to figure out what the right mechanism is to bring it forward. Is it to update the Canada Health Act to include palliative care as a covered service, or is it the Canada Health Accord that should be adopting it, or is it a specific government palliative program initiative? So there's some flexibility there, but essentially we need to do something to get a plan to have consistent access to palliative care for all Canadians. Issue that I'm trying to help Sarnia address. And if people come with other issues and you're in a role where you want to be nice to them, you want to meet with them, you want to be open, all that kind of thing, it chews up time, and time is really the enemy in this job. So having learned how to cut down on the number of lobbyists that I see, if they don't have anything to do with Sarnia, they don't have anything to do with any of the committees I'm chairing or involved in, or they're not about science, I don't have time for that. I'm polite, but I don't have time for that. And so I think that's been a key learning. I think also establishing the relationships. You get money by influence. The Liberals have recognized that I am willing to work collaboratively, that I'm not partisan where it's not needed, and that has gone a long way. So I think that has worked in our favor to get money for Sarnia. And then just the rules of Parliament and how things work there. Getting comfortable making speeches in English and French without having them written and memorized, being able to wing it on questions. That kind of comfort level has come over the 7 months I've been involved.
And as a member from a non-Francophone area, that must be a little different. Like, you're not, I don't imagine you're unique in that respect, but you're unusual in the sense that you can speak both languages.
Yes, well, I was lucky enough to be able to work for Dow in Quebec for about 10 years. I was in the plastics business and running experiments in French and places where there was no one else to intervene, so you have to learn to make yourself heard. Now, that said, I would say that there is still some upgrade needed, because although I had a working knowledge of French, and it was very technical French, now there's all this parliamentary jargon. So I have had a French tutor that the Parliament provides, and many of the parliamentarians are upgrading their skills either in English or in French. But she comes once or twice a week and teaches me all of the parliamentary phrases, how to talk about clerks and parliamentary analysts and bills and private members' bills and all these terms that I wasn't used to using.
Now, sorry for not being entirely prepared, but there's a private member's bill that let's talk about that.
Okay,
what the
so
status of that is.
My private member's bill is C-277. It is a bill to create a palliative care framework for Canada. And essentially, we're trying to make sure that we have consistent access for palliative care for all Canadians. The assisted dying legislation that was brought in was studying the Carter decision. And the special committee that was put together to look at that concluded that if you didn't have good palliative care, you really didn't have a true choice. And so based on that and an all-parliamentary committee that existed the previous session that studied palliative care and came out with recommendations, my bill then is the culmination of that. It sets out defining what service will be covered, the training levels that will be needed for the different levels of health care, getting a plan to implement consistent access across Canada, which will be difficult because there are places that have nothing And there are places that are very remote, so there's some challenges to address there. And then trying to figure out what the right mechanism is to bring it forward. Is it to update the Canada Health Act to include palliative care as a covered service, or is it the Canada Health Accord that should be adopting it, or is it a specific government palliative program initiative? So there's some flexibility there, but essentially we need to do something to get a plan to have consistent access to palliative care for all Canadians.
Now, how did you come to be involved in this particular issue?
Well, as the discussion started on assisted dying, I was given a book by one of the parliamentarians that's my seat partner called It's Not That Simple. And it was a book about all of the places that have implemented assisted dying and what the complications are and what the upsides are. And I began to see that where there is good palliative care, 95% of people choose to live as well as they can for as long as they can. And I thought, really, I would rather work on something to help people live longer than work on killing people. So with that in mind, I found out that there was this previous all-parliamentary committee and went and got the report, talked to the people that were involved that were still in Parliament. Harold Albrecht and Kelly Block in my party were both members of that team. And from there decided, you know what, this is a bill that will be worthwhile bringing forward, because either the bill will get accepted. Certainly the NDP are very supportive and have asked the question in the House of Commons and have said that they will support this bill. The Liberal government has said that there's $3 billion they've put into the budget for home and palliative care. And you know, the Minister of Health, Minister Philpott, has said she is supportive of palliative care. And so although there's no actual money showing in the budget at this point in time, and the Liberals did not accept any amendments to the assisted dying legislation that had to do with palliative care other than to continue to study it, I do think that bringing this bill forward will drive action, either by getting my bill approved or by having the Liberals come with their own bill to replace it.
And you're fine with that?
I'm fine with that. I mean, the ultimate result is to get consistent access for people.
When you said your seat partner, what does that mean?
Well, in the House of Commons, there's a seating plan, and so I'm seated next to Mark Warawa, who's the member for Langley, and he was very interested in palliative care and pro-life kind of approaches, and so he was the one that provided the book.
Okay, because I've heard, is he a Liberal then?
No, he's a Conservative.
Okay, so I've heard, and there's obviously a different term for it, but if you were needing to be away from the house, you're paired with a person.
This is a buddy system. This is a travel buddy thing.
Okay. So it evens out, like you're not there and that person isn't there, so you're both...
There are several outcomes they're looking for. One is to make sure that you're not voting disadvantaged. But I think the other hope on the part of the Liberal Party, they are way overspending their travel budget. And they are hoping that by forcing other parties to pair up with them, we would all be equally guilty together. That would be a potential outcome. We had a liaison committee, which is made up of all the chairs of all the committees.
Now, when you say over budget like that, is that travel to the constituency or?
Travel to do committee business, to gallivant around the world, to travel. I mean, I'll give you, for example, in the last 10 years, the parliamentary budget for travel has been $2.5 million for committees. The fiscal year started April the 1st. In the last 10 years, we've never spent the budget. It's always been 60 to 70% spent. Between April 1st and June 1st, the Liberals spent the entire budget. And so they came to ask for a $1.5 million supplement to the $2.5 million budget. And instead of discussing how they could cut some of the line items where there were 10 members going from the committee and 9 assistants, or 4 members going and 9 assistants, still, you know, an opportunity to cut. Canada Post wanted to do 23 consultations across the country. You know, really? So they decided to approve the $1.5 million supplement. And then several committee chairs said, well, we haven't decided what we want to do on our committees yet, and we may need money and it's not in there. What will we do then? And the chair of the liaison committee said, well, you'll come back for another supplement. So just totally opposite from how we would do things in business, where we would put our plans together and we would add up those plans, and if they exceeded the budget, we would all have to go back and take a look at what we're going to sacrifice and what we're going to trim off.
Yeah, it's the old joke, well, I'd run out of checks, or, just get
Right.
more
It's
checks.
not a blank check, and I feel for the taxpayer when 100,000 people are out of work in the oil and gas sectors, being hit very hard, small businesses under huge pressure. I just think that's not the time to be doing anything except austerity measures for travel. You can video conference, you can web meeting, you can teleconference. There's a lot of ways of getting input without actually going there.
One of the things I haven't written yet about, I know that you had a news release out that you're supporting the SWIFT
Yes.
funding. Let's talk about that for
Good.
this video.
This is really important and really exciting for Sarnia Lambton. It's essentially the federal government put 90 million in, the provincial government put 90 million in, and 90 million will come from the counties. And there are about 19 counties, in this Southwestern Ontario project. So within Sarnia Lambton, we have areas where there are gaps in internet connectivity. And in some places they have nothing. There's just a hole. Sombra is a huge issue. They have interference on their wireless systems from the US. They have inadequate speed and data transfer time on Bell, and there's nothing else. There are places in Brigden and Oil Springs that are also underserved, a lot of the rural parts of the community where there are holes. And so this project will essentially put hardware into the ground close enough that the cost of hooking up to a good internet service will be affordable, between probably $1,700 and $3,200 a year for a sign-up, which, when you look at what the options are today and what some people are paying in Sarnia Lambton, is a good deal. And it's a sustainable model in that by putting the hardware in place, the revenue then that comes will be used for the next run of hardware to run to where more customers exist. So,
is there a dovetail in this? I guess I should research it, but is there a dovetail in what Blue Water Regional Networks, Blue Water Power is doing? About their project?
Yeah, I think all of these things are complementary. There are also initiatives that are expected to bring some connectivities even earlier. Tech Savvy is working, Brook Telecom are working. A number of these private companies or independent companies are working as well to try to help the situation. So I think whatever we can do, we have to do it, because if you're going to compete globally in business, or even going to participate in business now, you need to have that speed. You need to be on the web. You need to be global.
Well, it's I think the fellow from Blue Water Regional Networks, Chris Gould, I don't know if you've met him.
I've heard of him.
But he said this is a real job creator.
Absolutely.
In terms of, getting
Absolutely.
the
This is how
fiber
you
in.
get small businesses that are internet based out of Sarnia Lambton.
Yeah.
This is how you grow your business. Agriculture technology is on the increase, and I saw some amazing things on my Israeli trip. But the use of satellites and different applications for monitoring soil and growth and all these kind of things are on the rise, and those are leading edge things that we need. You've got to have high-speed internet to be able to take advantage of those.
All right, so tell me about the next 3 to 6 months. I mean, you're here for the summer, but you're certainly not taking the summer off.
No. It's
hard
time to
work with-
reconnect here in the constituency with the different stakeholders, and also for my constituents to have better access to me. It's hard when I'm gone 3 weeks out of 4 for them to get in to see me. So I'm going to make sure I spend time with them. And then we will be consulting on electoral reform, which is a hot topic. We will be consulting on the national housing strategy, because there's some need here in Sarnia Lambton on that. We've already done a consult on the aging demographic. And there will be some border security issues that will arise, especially as the U.S. election results come through and we start to see what's actually going to happen there, and Bill C-21, that is a border issue.
Okay. What else is going on?
Well, of course, I'm always trying to figure out what is the next thing that we need to do, but it's all in priority. So I've met with the warden. We have an opportunity with the Canada 150 anniversary coming up to try to get our oil museum to be a World Heritage Site. There was an effort a number of years ago to get a UNESCO designation to make it a World Heritage Site. That's the place oil was first discovered in the world. It's documented, it's significant, and I think with our 150th Canadian anniversary coming up, that's something worth celebrating. So trying to get funding to go and recognize that and to expand the programming that's there, get that UNESCO designation, that's something worth doing.
Okay. When do you want to do this again?
Well, I would say it should be like once I get back in the house, there's going to be all of the new issues of what's the new crap going on.
The technical term.
The technical term, right? I mean, the fun and games on all of these consultations, this government wants to consult broadly with every single person on the planet until they find somebody that will say no so they don't have to do anything.
Okay.
If we can see where the consultations are landing, they're all sort of at the end of October coming to a head, and we should be hearing, there was defense consultations, we did one of those, there's electoral reform consultations, all of these things, and to see what the government's next slate of legislation is all about, because their current slate, they really ran out of stuff to talk about, and just wanted to keep us going till the assisted dying legislation came in, and then they adjourned the House as soon as that one was done, because they were kind of out of things to talk about.
All right, you're having fun?
There are pockets of excellence and pockets of where is my life. This is a very 24/7 kind of a job, and I need to find a balance so that I have some life
Well, you're
outside
getting
of
good,
this.
apparently, at saying no.
Well, I'm getting better at saying no.
Yeah.
There's still a myriad of things to do. The other thing I need to do is take time away, because it's hard to, you can't really relax here in Sarnia Lambton because everywhere I go, I'm under a microscope. So I tried to go to Mackinac to go to the Mackinac celebration that's up there. I thought, well, you know,
Up there?
up in Mackinac Island.
Okay, and you ran
And
into
as I
people.
was in the field where they were serving free vodka, there were 35 of my constituents there saying hello and making it clear that I was going to be on my best behavior there as well, which I was.